Welcome to Trial by Wine. We take a closer look at crimes that highlight how fascinating humans can be. Schmitty, Swanny and Clarkey visit crimes and run them through their jury of three, debating both sides of the case to agree an appropriate, if totally fictitious, sentence. Please be advised, Trial by Wine may include explicit or disturbing content and will include drunken rambling. Listener discretion is advised. All right, how are we?
Very well, and you?
I'm good, thanks. Yep.
Clarkey?
Well, today I'm a little bit concerned because over the Christmas break we did pudge it up a little bit, and so today we decided we'd go back to the gym. And so we just did this session called Cardio and Core, and I swear I pulled about 18 stomach muscles in the class. And so I'm worried now that if this is a funny session.
Oh, it's going to hurt.
It's going to hurt. So
you'll be good.
if you could deliver an unfunny one, that would be great. But, yeah, let's just see how it goes.
After our last session where we started Cruise Month.
That's right, yeah.
I feel like we are taking a slight detour here. So it might not have as many japes, as Schmitty would say, as the last session we did, which was hysterical. I really enjoyed doing that and listening to the cruise crimes. So, anyway, we'll see how we go.
Bring it.
I'm Schmitty.
I'm Swanny.
And I'm Clarkey. And together we are
Trial by Wine.
Vino.
And what are we drinking?
Go on, Swanny. You know you want it.
Oh, how shall I disappoint thee today?
Mineral water? Yeah.
Mineral water with a dash of lime.
Delicious.
Yeah, a little bit. What about you guys? What are you on?
We're having a Dalzotto Pinot Bianco, which is a little white wine, as you'd expect from that name. It's quite delicious, and it's chock full of ice because it's 35 degrees here today. So
Perfect.
everything warms up in second. What about you, Schmitty?
Oh, look, I'm...
Mango chutney?
No, I don't have it.
Pirate juice?
Pirate juice, yeah.
Got on the second guess.
Yeah, having a Pepsi Max and Bacardi.
I can't believe you're doing the Bacardis.
I keep forgetting about the Bacardi until I come back here and you mention it. And I think I've either got to buy a bottle or get one when I'm out.
It's literally just
Bacardi
because
and
it's
Coke,
in the house and I didn't have anything else prepared. So I just thought,
It's as good a reason as any.
And I like it. I like rum and Coke. I don't care. Tony is doing the wine thing. What are you drinking, Dale?
I'm having a glass of. I'm still having a glass of. It's called. What is it called? Martin.
What do you call it, love?
Martin.
What have you done to it?
I think it's called champagne.
It's a Limoux region sparkling wine.
Oh, that was close.
You were very close. Good guess.
Yeah.
Delish.
There you go. What do you got for us today, Swanny?
Well, this will come as no surprise to you, Schmitty, because you're the one who led me down this path. Being that I may have heard of this story, or maybe of interest. I think you can tick both boxes. When you brought it to my attention, of course I knew this crime.
Did you?
Yeah. I'd already left the UK when this all transpired, and I think I was already in Australia by that point, but I certainly remember it. And it's one of those ones where a lot of this crime, when we get to the, I don't want to use the word guts, but, when you get to it, there's a crime, but then there's a way.
Are there guts in the story?
No, nothing like that. Not at all. I just meant that as in, the way some things are presented are so sensationalized, and they'll pick up on a little piece of something that is part of the crime as a hook to get us in.
Yes.
And then actually when you get into it, you think,
it's really got nothing to do with it.
It's nearly an irrelevance, or they've actually totally fabricated or built something into something that was not really a major part of something that happened.
This isn't about Harry and Meghan, is it?
No, not at all.
Okay.
But I'll sort of draw it as we go through it.
Crimes against news of interest.
Yes, exactly.
Also, headings that are completely irrelevant to the story.
Clickbait, whatever else. It's because when Schmitty sort of mentioned it to me, I thought, oh God, I remember that. And I remember when I was first reading the articles about it, I found it quite confusing because what they were trying to show or to get your attention, to get you to click on the story was one part of a story that was probably not the major part, but that was what they knew would attract an audience, right? So when I went back through, I thought, yes, I know, but I can't quite remember and whatever else. So this has been a good exercise for me in actually finding out what actually happened versus what the headlines were at the time.
Are you talking about investigative journalism?
You're saying you did some research.
I feel
No. Well, when I tell you my sources, I think that will be absolutely not the case. But what I did was I tried to look sort of beyond the headlines, and that was one of the issues that came out for me when I looked at this story, which is, we totally are manipulated by what we're told and how we're, drawn into different stories and whatever else. And I can imagine, at the news desk and saying, oh my God, work on this point here, find out more information around that. But
Yes.
actually the crime's over here. And that's what's truly interesting, but that's how they're going to get the hook.
Yeah, here's your headline.
Yeah.
Go and make up a story that somehow fits it.
Correct.
Yeah.
My sources have been the Cinemaholic,
Nice.
the Sun, the New York Post, the Daily Mail, and perhaps most importantly, there was a blog that I'd found, and it was called Talk Murder With Me, and it was really interesting, and it set this story out in a very sort of digestible way. So I will use that as well. But that was probably the most engaging way for me to look at the story, because as I sort of alluded to before, so much of this was like a sensational headline and then again repeat of the story that we've seen across these sort of syndicated media things where you go, oh God, I've read it before, I've seen it before, I've seen it before.
I'm guessing this is a story about a murder then?
It is actually.
Yeah, otherwise Talk Murder With Me would just not be the right blog to be going to.
Do you know what? I hadn't really given that any thought when I just said that. There you go. There you go. You've got me there. Talk Murder With Me. I didn't even think of that. How embarrassing. This story starts in France, and it starts with a young girl who was born in Algeria. So she's
Algerian?
And then she moves. Well, she's French-Algerian.
French, but you're right.
French-Algerian, yeah. So she and her mother live in Paris, and she grows up in Paris. But she is what you would call French-Algerian, and she was a bit of a beauty. And this woman's name, or girl at the time, her name is Sabrina Kouider, which is very difficult to say, of course. So I might just be calling her Sabrina. Yeah. She and her mother, I think, by all accounts, think that her mum's a single mum, and she grows up in a not particularly illustrious way, but, I guess in the suburbs of Paris. And when she gets to be around, I think, 18, 19 years old, she meets a man. And again, I'm going to have to sort of butcher his name as well. And his name is Oussem Medouni, but they called him Sam, thankfully.
Excellent. So Sam and Sabrina.
Sam and Sabrina might make it a little bit more respectful for me to say their names in a way that doesn't butcher it every time I try and say it. But again, I suspect by his name, although I haven't had it confirmed, but he may also be French-Algerian. If not, he's certainly of a sort of Middle Eastern Arabic background. And they meet at a fun fair, I think, where she worked when she was about 19. He was 5 years older than her, so he was about 24 at the time. And by all accounts in the photographs of her, she's a beautiful looking woman. What we would call here in Australia exotic.
Right.
Exotic.
She's not from Shropshire then. Do you remember that ad?
No.
What's
that?
Oh God, it
coffee
was it was a coffee ad, and there's an African American guy, although English.
Yes.
African English guy, I don't know, walking, looking at the coffee, and this lady walks up, and he's a bit hot, and she's, in her 50s maybe, and she kind of looks at him and goes, "Oh, that looks nice," or something, and then pretends she's looking at the coffee. And she says, "Oh, I'm looking for something more exotic, like where you're from."
This.
And he, in a broad English accent, goes, "What, Shropshire?"
I can't quite place it, but yeah, it's really a bell. So they become a couple, and by all accounts, he was totally enamored with her, and she sort of had him around her little finger, even at that early stage, whereby there were occasions where she was with other men, but he was quite besotted. And it basically started a 17-year sort of what you would call on and off relationship. So basically, depending on where Sabrina was at, they were either together or they kind of weren't. But I think they were always sort of in each other's lives to a degree, but it was certainly more a case of she was the one who was wearing the pants and he was a little bit softer, and certainly so enamored with her that he kind of, followed her, did what she said, and tried to make her happy, be with her, etc. Because, as I said, she was really beautiful, if not a little fiery. So their time in Paris is somewhat short-lived because they are looking abroad. And let me have a look, about 2005, Sabrina decides that she's going to go and live in the UK, and she's going to become an au pair. Now, I'm sure everyone who's listening knows what an au pair is, but basically it's someone who comes and lives in your home if you have children. And the idea
It'd
is
be a
that
bit
they're
weird if they
supposed to
came
be
and lived in your home and you don't have children. Who's
Correct,
that? That's
very
the au
weird.
pair.
That's the au pair. Who are looking after?
Me.
Oh, me. Don't doubt that there would be scenarios where that's happening. Trust me,
Probably.
there'd be many, many, many. Not in Australia, I wouldn't think.
Sounds
but
more like a
certainly abroad.
live-in lover.
So Sabrina goes to the UK in 2005, and guess who follows her?
Sam.
Sam.
Yeah, Sam follows her. And what's quite interesting at this point, and this is one of the things that comes to bear, which is how they're portrayed by the media. At this stage, when they get to the UK, there's no real information about her being an au pair other than the fact that that's what she went to do. But what then starts to become the story is that they have a degree of success. He works in finance, and all of a sudden she's now a fashion designer, a stylist, a hairdresser. Like, she does all these sort of things within fashion, and they said that they're successful. But I mean, there's no real measurement there. That's just simply what the media says. And I suspect what was happening is that they had a degree of success, but I don't think it's quite the way it's portrayed, where you sort of go, oh, it's not like they were living the high life. But I suspect they were probably pretty comfortable, and I'm sure that they looked the part. And I think that is what is important through a lot of this, is the way Sabrina looks suggests that she is perhaps more successful or powerful or important or whatever it is. But I think her looks play a big role in how she's perceived by the outside world. Whilst she was there, so we're going a couple of years ahead now. So let's say she arrived 2005, and about 2011, Sabrina meets a gentleman by the name of Mark Watson. Now, it doesn't sound particularly auspicious, does it? Mark Watson. But Mark Watson turns out to be a very important person in Sabrina's life. What's very important to note at the outset was she met him in 2011 at a NatWest bank in Notting Hill in West London, and they started to have a relationship. What's important is that he was actually a former member of Boyzone. So you may or may not remember Boyzone.
Yeah.
An Irish,
Boy band,
hugely popular.
yeah,
Would that have been, say, late 90s or
That
early
was
2000s?
Ronan
maybe?
Keating, wasn't it?
Yes, I think it was.
Mm.
So when I say it's important to note that Mark was a former member
Yes.
of Boyzone.
Yeah.
Before
Now-
they were hugely successful? or-
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. So there's a photo that I can find where there's a whole lineup of them, and certainly more than what ended up being sort of the
He's
lineup
like that
as we would
fifth
have known.
Beatle.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's exactly the same kind of thing. Where remember Louis Walsh
Yeah.
from like X
He
Factor?
put them
and all those
together,
shows?
though.
Little
That's
Irish-
what made him famous, isn't it? That he put them together?
I think that's
Yeah.
right. Yes, but he was the way it's been described as
Did
Mark
you call
Watson
him
was
Little
pushed
Louis
out.
Walsh, by the way?
I think he is Little Louis Walsh.
He
from
is
memory.
Little Louis. Does
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that.
Oh, Little Louis Walsh. Everyone,
Little Irish Louis Walsh, like a little leprechaun.
he is a bit leprechaun-y, yeah.
So when she meets Mark, I wouldn't know that she would have thought that he was anything too important, but I guess back in that time,
He was part
anyone,
of
if
a
you
boy
said so-
band, yeah.
yes, even if he wasn't really in it, all she would say, he was in Boyzone, that would be enough to sort of, I guess, get most people interested.
And this is when? 2005, 2006?
2011.
Wow, that late.
So remember, she moved.
Right.
Yeah. So by this
So
point,
we'd
I
left,
imagine, 2005, she's arrived in London. So by this point, I think they're pretty established.
Yeah.
And when she actually meets Mark, it said that she'd actually turned her hand to pyramid selling for a telecommunications company.
Love
That
the
old
MLM.
chestnut.
Yep.
It is a little bit like that. And that's where I get slightly miffed when I read all of these articles. Oh, they did this and she was that. I think what she was somebody who was always trying to find the angle, right?
Yeah.
Where's I need money. I need money quickly. I'm beautiful. I can use this. I can use that. I need him. I don't need him now. Where they just use the people they need to get what they need at the time that they need it. And I think Sam would come in and out of focus for her based on her success with other men, other people, her working
He was
life.
a backup guy too,
Absolutely.
reliably always going to be there.
Correct.
Just sort of
And I've
fallback.
read somewhere that they purposely, or she certainly did, kept their relationship as ambiguous. So although she would often be seen with him, sometimes in public she'd say he was a relative, sometimes she'd say he was a friend. And whilst they were sort of, having this sort of ambiguous relationship, what they did have was they did have an Islamic marriage certificate to prove it. So at some point they were married, right? But then they chose for one reason or another not to always say that they were. So again,
is that like relationship fluid in the same context of gender fluid?
I think it is, because I don't think it's an open marriage, is it? That's different again.
Yeah.
It does feel like it got, as you say, it seems very fluid depending on where, their head's at any given time.
Yeah.
Never mind. What is interesting about her relationship with Barker is there's very little to go on. I know that they got together in 2011, and I know that they had what was at best described a turbulent relationship. But what becomes important and very quickly is, although they were together, I think probably throughout 2011, and I've heard that they sort of split in 2012, but he described them being together from 2011 sort of to 2013. I think we're yet again in a territory where it's not this sort of straight relationship. I think it's on, it's off. Everything's always turbulent. There's always drama around Tito. It's all, everyone loves everybody, but it's fraught. So
everything about her and the way you're describing it, it makes me think about like one of those Real Wives type programs. Everything's fine, and then we're all having a massive fight, and someone's throwing wine in someone's face and storming out of a very ritzy place, and then this is I get that feeling she's got that energy about her.
Oh, totally. She's hot, she's cold, but it's that thing where when you're watching movies and the man's always falling for the woman because she's so passionate, and then all of a sudden she's she's
passionate,
a hot sex goddess, and then all of a sudden she's a crazy bitch.
Exactly. I mean,
they're like,
it's a real double-edged sword, isn't it? Like you're passionate, but you're really a bit of a psycho. Oh no, you're just passionate. You're just hot-blooded. Oh, yeah, whatever.
Correct.
I think you're hot-blooded if you're, a hot Spaniard or something. You're psycho if you start killing someone.
Yes,
I think there's a fairly clear differentiation.
I don't know about that, because you could be psychopathic and not kill someone. Just
yes,
murder isn't the hard line of psychopathy.
But that doesn't make you passionate. Or
no, but people could think that you were hot-blooded and passionate, and you end up being a murderer, and it turns out you were a psychopath all along. Or you could just go around having dramas and people still think you're a psychopath, but you haven't killed anyone. Oh, God, that one. She's always carrying on. Always a drama with her.
Yes.
We used to work with someone like that.
I don't know who you're referring to. Moving right along.
So Sabrina at this point is probably about early 30s. I don't know exactly, but basically when she's with Mark, she's looking good. Things are flying high. They've got this sort of turbulent relationship. And one of my favourite quotes is, though, that she at one point, when she would get angry with him, he'd said that he refused to buy her an item when they were like out shopping in Oxford Street in central London. So she ran into the street and she shouted out, "Mr. Boyzone has no money." And I could so imagine this type of woman do that. So I'll show you. You think you're all that? I'm going to threaten you're going to go out and stand in the middle of the street, and say you've got no money. You say you're Mr. Boyzone or whatever, but you've got no money. And I thought, that tells me a lot, I think. Well, she's a real piece of work.
Yeah. And that's how she treats her partner.
Yes. So they move in together.
Did you see? You didn't when you were telling that. I don't think you saw Wooey's expression here. This big dropped jaw, like what? He was horrified.
Mr. Boyzone has
no money.
And to be honest, I don't know that Mr. Boyzone does have a lot of money.
Well, no, because not if little Louis Walsh was his manager.
No, that's exactly right. Because we'd see this time and time again, whether or not they're involved. And remember,
they looked good.
He's been before they've gone on to success. But what I think we also probably all now know is making money in the music industry doesn't always come with being the performer.
Correct.
If you've been the person who's the writer of
or the producer, the label, they make the money.
Yeah. Yep. So from what I understand, he has made that shift, and he still works in the music industry. So I don't know how much money is what I'm saying, but it's irrelevant when it comes to headlines. The fact that he was in Boyzone for whether it was 5 minutes or 5 years before he said he will be Mr. Boyzone, because that's how you get the audience. So I do think it was quite funny that when she ran into the street saying Mr. Boyzone has no money, everybody's trading on that. She's the one who's trading on that with him. He's the one who's trading on it to meet women. It's the newspapers are trading on it. The story's nowhere near as sexy for any of them, him, her, or the newspaper, if he wasn't Mr. Boyzone, right? I find that really
Mr. Boyzone, I love it.
That's the cult of celebrity and the
there was one of him.
We live in. Yeah, exactly. From mid 2012, the pair split, and Walton moved to Los Angeles and he continued to support her financially. But what becomes very weird in the story here is
So
that
he's got no
there's
money to buy her a ring, but he's got money to support her financially.
Oh no, it wasn't a ring. It was just. It doesn't say what it was. It was just an item. So it wasn't a ring, but whether it was a handbag or some clothes or whatever it was, he's obviously said no, and she's gone, well, I'll show you.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. I don't really know whether he had access to a hell of a lot of money, some money, whatever else, but he did look after her and he was giving her money and financially supporting her whilst she was in London. And then when they split and he goes to LA, he continued to send her money monthly. And that's important because Sabrina, and this is where it's really difficult to get a hold on this, and even in the blog that I read with Talk Murder With Me, and I suspect she did an awful lot more research than what I did, Sabrina has 2 sons. She ends up with 2 sons.
Where did they come from?
And one of them is said to be Mark Watson's son, which would make sense in the sense that he then continues
I was wondering
to
about that.
Can I just interject? Isn't his name Mark Walton?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
I've done it again, time and time again.
You're even butchering the easy names. Well done. We could do a podcast.
The irony in that, I couldn't. Oh my God.
We could do a
There's
podcast
the irony. There's the irony.
Talk Murdering Names with Me.
Oh my God, I'm so consistently
It's
bad
all
at
right.
this.
It's all right. Mark Walton. Apparently in 2006, he claimed to be a billionaire. Sorry, 2016, he was telling people he was a billionaire. So if she was having fights with him, what was the time period you were saying?
That was
earlier.
Much. That was about 2012, 2013.
Yeah, well, he might not have made it by then, but he reckons he started. Do you remember Bewitched? Bewitched?
Yeah.
Apparently he said.
Oh, them.
Yeah,
Yes.
he was shading.
I can't remember that. I saw them recently.
Dating Shane Lynch's sister Adele, whoever these people are.
Yes,
and
I know
encouraged
her.
her to put the girl band together, and we created Bewitched, which turned out really well. And then he went off, and I enjoyed this part. He's now based in Los Angeles, 2016, and has become a judge on Vietnam's Pop Idol, and he became very, very famous over there.
And we know that he would have been former Boyzone.
Boyzone. That's how he, exactly.
I better say Boyzone now.
That was his credentials. So it was the Boyzone thing. But that was in 2016. He was saying he was a billionaire, and everything was going fabulously for him at that point in time. But as you say, when she was shouting out, "Mr. Boyzone's got the money," and I don't know why I did that accent, but it just feels appropriate.
Mr. Boyzone has no money. Now I'm saying
she's French. She's French.
Oh, yes.
Mr. Boyzone has no money.
Mr. Boyzone has no money.
Mon ami.
Anyway, enough of that silliness.
So things are sort of take a bit of I wouldn't quite say dark turn, but things are not great. And he's sending her money. And at this point, she appears to move to Southfields. Does anyone know where Southfields is?
No.
I know it because it is the train stop when you go to Wimbledon. So you don't actually get the tube to Wimbledon, you get the train to Southfields.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and so you will have seen it. So the train or the tube stops in Southfields, but it's in Wimbledon Park, and she moves to a house there. And again, this is where it annoys me because it starts to talk about them being well off or very comfortable or whatever else. I don't think that was the case.
Yes.
I think it was still, trying to present one thing and, well, yes, it sounds like a nice area. But like anyone who's spent any time in London knows, in every street there's a terrible part and a really amazing part. And it's not always what it seems. It's not that they've got this incredible address in Wimbledon. I don't buy that. Yeah. And if they're living on Wimbledon Park Road, there are houses there that are probably incredible and also probably some pretty shabby stuff around the shops. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I can't get but do you know what I mean? I can't get a real read on what they're like. It's that usual thing go, oh my God, they live somewhere incredibly up.
3 streets are incredible.
Yeah.
5
but
streets
did
are
you?
shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think again, it's a little bit of struggle town in a nice area. So they've split in 2012. Mark, we'll just call him Mark, shall we? Mark's gone to LA to work in the music industry, continued his support her financially. And there's a quote here in the Daily Mail that says, between September 2013 and February 2014, Walton sent her £12,800 for rent for her Southwest London property, which is the one that was in Southfields,
Yep.
Woodland Park Road. In March 2014, Walton continued to stay in contact with her via email, apologising for late payment for her rent, and once sending her an email which declared, "I'll love you to the day I die."
Oh.
But again, that could be
A lyric from a
construed-
song.
But it could be love it. You can say, "Oh, I love you to the day I die. I love you. You're a darling. It's all sorted. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about me. I'll always love you. Here's the money." Or it could be, a bit psycho. "I'm going to love you to the day you die." No one knows really how that was supposed to be interpreted. That was not reciprocated. So what they go on to say is that at this point, any chance of reconciliation, whether that was what he was even after, I don't know. We don't really know what they broke up. That is sort of all withered away, because what they're saying is that Sabrina then started to launch a barrage of allegations against Walton. And she starts this sort of campaign of things that she claims that he was doing or trying to do.
All right.
So she claimed he tried to kill her in July 2014, and she continued to make false allegations that Walton was harassing her. She alleged he was hacking into her phone, her email address, and that he had someone acting on his behalf that assaulted her and stole her iPad. She also went as far as saying that he had mistreated her cat when the couple never owned a pet.
Oh.
And he was actually questioned and taken in for this because she said that he had sexually assaulted
Her cat? Her cat?
Yeah.
She did not.
But she didn't have
Are
a
you
cat,
sure
right?
it was just not a language issue?
I
Yeah.
don't know what it was. No.
Did she say pussy?
Oh,
No, I'm not sure.
Thank you for clarifying that, Tony.
Yeah, I left that nicely there, nicely subtly done, and bang, the sledgehammer fell. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it gets a little bit dark and it gets a bit sort of... And this is where I think, with someone like Sabrina, there's an event sometimes and it starts sort of what I would call a bit of a spiral. And you can just sort of see it start to pick a bit of momentum up. And then at this point, she starts making claims about the fact Walton used black magic to control her and there was nothing that she could do about it.
Oh, okay.
By all accounts, I get the impression that Mark's in LA busy,
Yeah.
like really in a recording studio or doing whatever else, just getting on with stuff, sending him money where needs be. But something shifted in her mind and she's on one and she starts to make these sort of increasingly outrageous claims and really damaging ones. There's nothing there that's sort of like not trying to publicly vilify someone.
Yeah,
Do you know
just
what I mean?
slanderous.
It's one thing. Correct. It's one thing to walk into the middle of the road, and I've probably done this with my husband, where it's like, "Oh, you can't afford to buy me that, Mr. Big Shot." You know what I mean? Yeah. Oh, Mr. Boyzone. But that's very low level compared to when you start saying, "I think that person's sexually
Having
acting
sex
with our cat."
that we
The
never
cat.
had.
that you don't have.
Yeah, or stealing something, or having people come to take things off you, whatever. So
Or
you start
using
to-
black magic.
Yeah, and it'll come as no big surprise to you that after she split from, now we're calling him a music mogul. I mean, again, I'm
Yeah,
not sure he's
right.
a music
Well,
mogul. This is where I
it
start.
got very
He might
big in
be,
2016 with that Vietnamese pop idol.
but this is before
I
that.
know,
That's what
I know.
find
I'm just
interesting.
laughing
So I
at the
think
fact that
maybe
it's
go
called
through-
a music mogul. Yeah.
But he might well become that. And that's, again, it's hard to tell because of when they try and use these big terms in the newspaper, it's nothing a lot of the time, I don't think.
yeah.
But anyway, she went back to Medouni, Sam. So he would come and go from their South London flat. Why does it say South London? It wasn't South, it was Southwest London. And what was described as a house is now all of a
A
sudden a flat.
flat.
Yeah. There's a couple of images later on that come to bear. And I'm like, I don't think we were talking about anything particularly palatial. I think it was just a, pretty standard,
2 up, 2 down type thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Probably on the, the high street or one of the main thoroughfares there.
Right.
But he does start to live with her again.
Well,
And-
that's nice.
You mean her husband?
Yeah. She helped with his French pancake stall.
Crêpe, crêpe, crêpe.
This is not quite the
Crêperie.
person who, 5 minutes ago was a fashion designer. And
Yeah.
this is where it's like, it's like, well, who was she? What were they? They were just, honestly.
Grafters. Hustlers.
Doing bits and pieces, hustlers. Where they're just getting by. They're, they're who they are for any point when they are. And I don't think that they're.
Did you
all
say
that.
chapstick or chavs?
Chavs. I was
I
going to
don't
say
think
pie
so.
keys.
They're not. They're neither.
Halves.
The Chahavs. No, I don't think they are because they're not wearing sports gear, are they? And driving
No.
Ford. What were they?
Escorts.
Short
Ford
escorts.
Escort. That was it. Ford Escort.
Ford Carltons.
So they were, and this is where it's in. Well, there's lots of interesting points to it, but this is one of the things that's hard to get a handle on when you read about these, cases, stories. There are 2 children, but there's no mention. I have no names. I believe that one is Mark Walton's son, and the other one is from a former relationship. But I don't know if it's Sam's son. I don't think it is. I think it's just from a former relationship. And so these children at this point,
Not from the
heading
abused cat, is it?
a little kitten.
I mean, I don't think that's what's happened, but I just want to check.
Yes, but I don't think things were going so well, because it says that Sabrina had to start claiming benefits, and she continued to accept significant financial support from Mark Walden long after they split up. But again, I guess she would need to if she had a child with him. When the handouts dried up, however, she racked up £20,000 in unpaid rent on the 2-bedroom. So now it's gone from a house to a flat to an apartment to a 2-bedroom garden flat in an upmarket area of southwest London. This is what drives me crazy. Everywhere it's described as something slightly different. But yeah, it is what it is.
It's like whack-a-mole trying to get the facts, isn't it? Like,
correct. So that's where we will sort of put a bit of a pause on Sabrina, but that's where she was in her life, and now we need to meet someone else.
Ooh.
Yeah.
who can it
And that
be?
someone else is also an au pair, and the young girl that we're going to meet is a young girl called Sophie Leonie. Anyway, she is from a town called Troyes in northeast France, and she's going to arrive in the UK as an au pair herself.
Mm-hmm.
And she's about 20 years old. So it was her first time she'd ever done anything, to be perfectly honest. She's a very sort of small town girl. Where she was from was, really just a small town France.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that it was anything, she wasn't a girl who'd had any real experience in her life. I think she'd gone to school, she'd done a bit of a childcare course, and it was time to go and learn some English. So off to the UK she was going to go. So she arrived in the UK, and guess whose au pair she became? Correct. So at first, Sophie's experience as an au pair for Sam and Sabrina was a positive one. The children, apparently there were 2 boys, adored her, and she was in her element looking after them. And she was also able to befriend another of other nannies working in the area. And anyone I don't quite see it so much here. Maybe it would be different if we lived in Sydney or Melbourne, but certainly when my experience was when we lived in London, there was an absolute,
never seen it like
in
London.
There's an absolute community of nannies. And depending on where they've come from, they have a pretty good support network.
I reckon New York is the other place you'd see it. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And there's a whole different situation. But if you've ever been in Hong Kong, and whilst they're not au pairs, the Ama, I think they call them in Hong Kong, there's a day that you go out where they all have the day off. And I don't know if it's a Saturday or a Sunday. And I'd never seen anything like it. They all congregate together. So there's a real community sense that they come together and they share their stories and what they're doing. So early stage of Sophie's experience when she's moved to Wimbledon with this pair and it was actually quite positive. And people were seeing her. She'd call her mother, Catherine, and she seemed happy and pleased, and she was really enjoying the beginning of the experience. She seemed to get along with Sabrina, had cups of tea with her over the table. And as a mother and someone who has had au pairs and nannies, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes, the idea is that they become an extension of your family. So if the idea would be for an au pair or a nanny that if someone's going to be in your home, someone's going to be around you and your partner, and certainly the main sort of caregiver at times for your children, you'd want to have a pretty good relationship. That's kind of the goal.
Yeah.
And I've seen it go terribly wrong. I think even in our own experience, sometimes it's not something that's always smooth sailing. But I mean, nothing of this
like
nature.
I'm guessing Sabrina, though, with her personality type, is very good at managing that if it does go wrong.
Oh yeah, I'm sure she'd be tickety-boo. I think so. Whilst things were going well, it didn't take long for things to sort of take a downhill turn. And that downhill turn relates to Mark Walton. And what becomes very apparent is that Sabrina has like these obsessive sort of thoughts and ideas about Mark Walton and his role in her life and what he is trying to do to her.
But he's not
and
around,
her
is
children.
he? He's in LA.
Yeah, he's in LA.
Or Vietnam, minding his own
He
business.
yeah. Vietnam, yeah. Mark Walton, as we said, was Mr. Boyzone, so her ex-boyfriend, and we believe the father to her younger, her younger child. Yeah,
Certainly makes sense of all the money he's given her.
And the ongoing connection,
and that I love you forever kind of thing. You're the mother of my child, etc. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So whilst he's in LA, she just starts to become quite delusional, and
she starts to become delusional.
Well, no, she was a bit of a, let's say she was a manipulative, a pain in the ass.
I thought he was going to say a toe rag, a bit of a toe rag.
She seems to have this sort of idea that he wants to do harm to her. And I don't know where it comes from, though. And that's what's quite interesting. It's like it escalates quite quickly.
She's projecting her own thoughts about herself, I'm going to go with.
Yeah. And it becomes like a rage. So obviously I didn't have a great breakup. So, it could be that. It could be to do with custody around the child. But there is nothing that you read anywhere that suggests that
he's trying
it was
to get
a real
custody.
problem. By all accounts, he just sounds like he's off working. You know what I mean? He's here's some money. It's all good. I've got my life. He's not saying I'm setting for the child or anything like that. It doesn't seem to add up. I can only assume that she's actually just majorly pissed off because it comes down to money would be my, first go-to.
And she's a little bit bonkers.
Totally. This idea that she's, telling him, saying that he sexually abused the cat, using black magic on her. Then she goes as far as saying that, I mentioned that she'd said that he'd hired someone to steal her iPad, but then she was saying, like, if a helicopter went over her house, it was him flying over to spy on her.
What's the going rate to hire someone to steal your iPad?
Or fly a helicopter over your house.
It'd be cheaper just to go and buy an iPad. Like, what the fuck, lady?
I know. That is so good. So in all, she reported Walton about 30 times to the police, all of which turned out to be bogus. And she was given a caution by the police for creating a fake Facebook profile, which she just used to harass him, mainly accusing him of being a pedophile.
Oh, brilliant. Mold.
So you look at this
What was the Facebook page name? Was it her name or was it?
I don't know.
Okay.
How it becomes relevant is because guess who ends up being roped into that, misinformation and paranoia and all that craziness and rage is the poor au pair.
Poor au pair, yeah.
So
right.
Sophie, So she starts to project her rage and obsession with Mark, who she has no access to, right?
Yeah.
He's over in London. But guess who's in the house?
Yeah, someone's got to pay.
Miss, lovely, sweet. I mean, I don't want to use the word weak, but, this girl is, she's just turned up. So she starts at Sophie. She starts suggesting that Sophie's having a relationship with Mark. Sophie has never met Mark and never does meet Mark.
She's a batshit crazy woman.
So first of all, she starts accusing her of sleeping with Mark Walton. And then she starts to get into this sort of mindset of saying, you're trying to help him get into the house to do harm to us. And this is where she starts to rope Sam in more. Like, Sam just seems to go with the flow. And when she starts to become increasingly nasty to Sophie, initially I think he would sort of leave the house and just let her be a biatch and get on with it. But then she starts to rope him into it, and it becomes, you'll have to forgive me because I can't remember the exact episode, but I know that they were Swedish, but she starts to do that. Is it Folie à Deux?
Yeah.
When her madness and her obsession,
Crash test dummies.
Crash test dummies, yeah. They were the Swedish twins, yeah.
That's right. I knew that was Swedish. That's right. It becomes a little bit of a campaign like that where little by little she turns him into a nut job as well that's totally convinced that Mark Walton is trying to do harm to them, both of them physically, like as in Sabrina and Sam, but also the children who have no name.
And may or may not exist.
So I think what they sort of go on later to sort of presume is that they did suffer from that very rare psychological disorder known as folie à deux, which means madness for two.
We say it's very rare, and yet I feel like we've seen it a bit.
I know.
I don't know if it's that rare at all.
Well, an example that they gave in one of the other articles was the Moores murders. And I didn't know that was a case. So Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, who I've heard their names and I've heard
oh,
the
my
case
goodness.
a lot.
Yeah.
But I didn't.
Yes, I think that might have been a folie à deux. Well,
yeah.
He was one of these days I'll cover that one, but he was a nasty bully and she was led by him, but she was a pretty vicious person herself. I'm not convinced about folie à deux with him anyway. But yes, that is one that's famous. Oh, it's used as an excuse, but I'm not sure.
So, we have this guy in Sam, who, has kind of followed her to the UK He's in and out of her life based on what suits her. But this is when things really start to take a more sinister turn. And, in her starting to go after Sophie and project all of that onto Sophie, he is witness to that. But then she manages to rope him and get him on board and think, well, actually, yes, we are at risk. What are these pair up to? They're colluding. And this poor girl is honestly sat there going,
what?
No, who?
Who's Mark Walton?
You could imagine in her broken English.
Yeah.
And you're Mark Walton. I'm like, who? Did you say Mark Watson? Now I know him. I was like, sorry about that.
Excusez-moi.
Pardon. So he becomes completely on board, and we then sort of start in this very dark spot. Yeah, exactly.
That's about my five French expressions.
Isn't that a Kylie Minogue song?
Je ne comprends pas.
Oh, no. Je ne sais pas pourquoi.
The Southfield/Wimbledon community starts to see a real shift in Sophie. So she's becoming more withdrawn, both physically and I don't necessarily know if I mean mentally, but certainly
her behaviour.
Yeah, behaviour, the way she's interacting with her, she's pulling away. They're seeing less of her. She's certainly not as happy as what she was. And I don't think that her English starts to decrease. All the things that were the things that she was there for, she was always shy, but she was making it. Now this is all coming to bear that she's just becoming more and more introverted, not really speaking as much English as she was, and not speaking to people that she didn't know well at all, but closing down.
Yeah.
And there was one person that she did have something to do with, which was a local fish and chip shop owner, and he had quite a nice relationship with her, but also the employers. So he knew Sam and Sabrina, and at one point they were talking about doing some business together. I'm sure it was like a pancake stand or something.
Fish and chips and
I think crepe is the correct word.
Correct.
Creperie.
Yeah. And
stop your creperie with me, Clarky.
I'm full of creperie.
That's enough of your creperie. Sorry, Swanny.
I think I've got a cert 3 in creperie.
I do love a crepe. My children.
Do you love a what?
I love a big
she's
crepe.
She's sitting there. I thought she was getting annoyed with us, but no, she's having a little thought about
the moment.
Oh, I love it.
No, because I was just thinking, it just came up the other day because Grandma has been here and she made pancakes for the boys. And one of them was remembering that we'd had crepe in Paris recently. And he goes, remember the one you had, Mum? And I couldn't. I actually, surprised, I remember nothing. And I was like, oh, yeah, I remember the restaurant. And I said, remember it had such and such. And then we remembered what it was. I bought it by accident. And all it had on it was, normally I would have lemon and sugar, but it was butter and sugar.
Yum.
Oh, my God.
Yum.
It was a revelation. It must have been the most fattening thing on earth.
Yum.
But, oh, my God, it was so, so good. And we were just reminiscing. When sometimes a food memory from somewhere is sometimes the very best memories.
Yeah.
Oh, my God, it was good. It was good. And it was just an accent that I got. It was good.
Butter and sugar.
Beurre et sucre. Oh, it was good.
Delicious.
Yeah, so poor Sophie's on a downhill run, really. Yeah. And it becomes very apparent that she's being totally manipulated, and they've pretty much, they gain control over her, but they do certain things where they start to bombard her with this constant, you're seeing Mark Walton, you are in collusion with him, you're taking money from him, you're sleeping with him, you're trying to get him into our house, he wants to hurt us, he wants to hurt the children. And they just bully her and totally intimidate her pretty much non-stop. And it becomes this sort of downhill trajectory of the outside world seeing Sophie become very unhappy. She stops sort of talking to her parents. At one point, she sort of talks about coming home, but she can't afford to come home.
Yeah, right.
And what we sort of also realise is the fact that, guess what, Sam and
they're not paying her.
Sabrina, they stop paying her.
Yeah.
They take away her ID card, which is like your passport. Yeah, they just.
Oh.
Yeah.
This is like modern slavery.
Totally. They take away a phone.
Oh, God.
And so as things escalate, she has less and less
cut her off.
opportunity.
Loses all their freedoms. Yeah.
Shit.
Absolutely. They never actually found a passport, but they said they think that they were destroyed. But all the things that she had any chance of sort of getting out, she wasn't able to.
Yeah.
On August 8, 2017, Catherine, who's her mother, called her daughter crying and sounding disorientated, which is important, during a phone call. because we find out at that point Sophie was now being beaten.
Right.
She was no longer being paid, and she was being interrogated regularly. They were
Over
not being
nothing.
Yeah, nothing. Just total fabrication. Absolute bullshit.
Craziness.
So, so she's a girl who's in a foreign country. And I mean, to be honest, they're probably speaking French to her, so I guess maybe that's something. But they are at her about something that is so blatantly not true that she can't say that any of it, or I might have done that. It's all wrong, right? Nothing has occurred. She'd never met this guy.
Are they just assholes, or is there?
It's very hard to argue. I'm sorry, Clarky, but it's an interesting thing when you're faced with someone who has convinced themselves of a narrative and an idea of a situation, a perception, whatever, and you say, well, I didn't do that. It's very hard you can't change their minds. They're absolutely convinced that that's what you did.
Yeah.
And, regardless of whether or not that is factual or that is your perception of it or anything like that, honestly, you cannot change the mind of someone who has decided you are doing this or you have done this. And it's very frustrating when you, at the other end of the accusation, knowing that you've not done that, but you're faced with it. So I can't imagine this girl's situation because there's just nothing in this that is real. But how does she prove or disprove it? She's being cut off from everything. Sorry, Clarky, what were you going to say?
No, it's a really good point. I guess what I'm wondering is there some kind of mental health issue with Sabrina that makes her
100%.
think that?
Yes.
Or does she get joy out of being an absolute bully?
It is a mental health situation.
Is it?
She is diagnosed, yeah.
I think that whole black magic
yeah.
stuff, all of that starts to sound like paranoid delusions. When she's talking earlier about Mark Walton's, the helicopters flying over and that's spying on her, they're paranoid delusions, yeah.
And I will go on to that later, but yeah, she does have a mental health issue and she's diagnosed as having borderline personality disorder.
Right.
None of which should lead her to behave the way she is, though.
No, at points in her life,
she's just got a borderline personality. She's like, she doesn't have a great personality. It's not a bad personality.
But that's what I wonder. Does she kind of get off on this sort of bullying, really inappropriate treatment of someone? It doesn't sound like a normal reaction to.
No,
it's not. It's not
believing something that's not actually happening.
And there'll be a trial, and we will get to that. And when people come to speak about her, people who had known her other than Mark Walton and Sam, she'd always be this explosive character who could be, as fabulous and as fun and as beautiful as she was wicked the whole time. Like, she would always be going from one extreme to the next, and that would often be triggered by nothing. Like, they didn't know when she would explode and how she'd end up being an absolute nut job. And
I guess that's what I'm kind of wondering. Is this just normal behaviour for her, not part of the mental health?
It sounds like an
issue?
escalation.
An escalation.
She might have had tendencies towards this, but something has, like you said earlier, Carla, some event, and it might have been the breakup or even having the child, or I don't know. But
the only thing, and the only source I can find that is in the New York Post, and it's not mentioned anywhere else, but it says it appears to stem from Walton leaving her, that we've covered, right? And stopping supporting her financially because, this is the only time I read this anywhere, because he could not be sure he was the father of her son.
Yeah, right.
There we go.
That, for me,
boom,
might be the only thing that I go,
So she's got...
That would explain why she escalates.
How very dare he.
Yeah, as she escalates her fury towards him. And then at some point it crosses over into... I've been telling myself these lies or, creating this narrative to be angry with him, but now I actually am believing it.
And I've got it here in my notes. It's the only reason I wrote why. That's the only why I can find is that, because everything else is he's being nice, he's giving money, and I guess he got to a point, where he must have questioned something, but it's not in any of the English stuff. It's out of something out of the US again, so who knows, but it felt like it would resonate with me as a potential sort of reason to escalate things.
It makes the most sense out of everything,
I think, she's got one kid now possibly to Mark Walton and another kid that we don't know who the father is. And all of a sudden now the kid to Mark Walton may not be Mark Walton's kid. Mm-hmm. And that's his fault. She's quality.
There was a quote somewhere that I read that she was convinced that he was spying on them. I've said this before, that she was convinced that he was having sex with Sophie and that he was even extracting Sam's semen to frame him for rape.
What?
How do you extract someone's semen without
I
them
don't
knowing?
know, but she had said this is the kind of stuff that was being said in that house. I mean, it was absolute madness, right? You can just see it. Can you imagine? It was probably an absolute,
I've got an idea.
I don't know, weird hovel.
I'm wondering about wet patches. Like if he has
Scratch and think, oh, what is that? A turkey baster?
That's a giant syringe. What does it look like? This is how you
into
extract
the
some
nutsack.
semen.
Oh,
It's a cooking syringe. I use
Too
it to
far.
put
Oh, would you use that
marinade
for
into
shooting?
meat. Yeah, but it's a giant
Oh, goodness
syringe. We
me.
use it for cooking. Yes.
Tony looked a bit
Well,
concerned.
it should.
He was like, looking with his side eye. Oh, God, what?
A clockwork orange. No. What? One flew over the cuckoo's nest type syringe.
it's
Yeah,
huge.
it's massive. It's a cooking syringe. That's what.
If you ever need your meat marinated, Tony, you know where to go.
Never again.
Well, we were meant to be getting married on the 25th of Feb.
I'm a bit of a spoiler alert. Basically, they then kept her prisoner in the house for 12 days and she wasn't allowed out. She wasn't eating. But
When you say she
They
wasn't
were
eating,
filming.
she wasn't eating by choice, or they weren't feeding her.
I was
No,
starving
not feeding
her.
her.
Yeah, right.
Starving her, yeah. But they were good enough to film the interrogations. So there's 8 hours of footage of the ones that they did film of them interrogating her, which of course they were then, able to use.
They weren't thinking about this. This was
No, not particularly well.
This goes back to your folie à deux thing. Like there's no rational thought going into any of this. There's no planning. It's just react. Yeah.
Eventually, on the 12th night, on the night Sophie died, she had been tortured and then she was drowned in a bathtub.
What?
God.
By both of them. Yeah, because she wouldn't tell them what they wanted to hear because she didn't have what they wanted to hear, right? Because it wasn't true.
Yeah.
So the more they pushed, I think she was so tired and was so sick of.
She just shut down.
Well, I don't know
hasn't
that she
been
wasn't. She
fed.
knew the writing. I think she knew the writing was on the wall, and they've said that. They said
that
she would have known
awful?
by this point where it was heading after being tortured for so long. And so, how do we then know that Sophie has been murdered? Well, the Wimbledon Fire Brigade, South Wales Fire Brigade, get a call.
No.
I think the following day to say that there's a rancid-smelling barbecue in the backyard.
They do not.
Not only did they, first of all, they had put her body, they shoved it into a suitcase after they had drowned her. They put her into a suitcase and then they had a little bit of time to try and work out what they were going to do with her body. So they were found by the fire brigade barbecuing. When the fire brigade arrived, Sam and Sabrina had a small barbecue, and I've seen photos of this, and this is where I know it wasn't a particularly big house, whatever. You would
It's one of those tiny little.
You'd look at it and you know, yeah.
Flat, your London flat
Yeah,
gardens.
that's their backyard.
Yeah.
And nothing grows in it except algae because
Weeds.
there's no sun,
No
into it.
light.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they were barbecuing Sophie.
What they were actually doing, there was a distraction. So what they were doing is her body was burning over here in the backyard, and they were on another small Weber-style barbecue turning chicken. Because they thought the smell of the chicken would mask the fact that they were burning.
They are fucked.
I
know, right? So the body is burning.
People.
The neighbours have called and said, look, there's this terrible smell. Something's burning out of control in the backyard of this house. When the fire brigade arrived, these pair are cool as cucumbers turning chicken.
Were you in the UK when the foot and mouth thing happened? Was it foot and mouth? Not anthrax, but foot and mouth.
I think that's before me.
It was
their
like
time, was it?
99 or 2000, 2001, around that period. There had a outbreak of foot and mouth.
Before me.
Foot and mouth, I think, yeah.
I remember driving with Andy up to the Lakes District and then up through to Scotland, and they were burning all the animals and the cows. The smell was horrific.
Like chicken on a barbecue?
No, nothing like chicken on a barbecue. And I imagine that you're talking about a similar smell. And
I mean,
they
may
when you
as
said
well
the
have
neighbours
gone.
said it was rancid. That's a good term for it. Yeah.
They may as well have gone
Yes.
pig. At least then it would be long pig and pig.
Oh, God.
Long pig and chicken? No.
Long pig.
If you were going to do that, seriously, you'd have to have a whole... Firstly, I think he
You
was probably
wouldn't do
Muslim,
it
so
in a-
why would he have a full spit roast pig. You'd have to do a spit roast pig, right, if you were going to try and do that. You can't do that on a Weber.
I love how you're going to tell us how you could get away with it.
Well, if anyone would know.
I know,
Right.
right?
To like this at all. That's what I said earlier. There was no planning. There was no.
Because
no
you do it in your
real
tiny
thought
little
given to this.
backyard. Like, God.
That's right. I
They
didn't
are.
think about it. Silly billies.
Oh,
Yes,
Jesus.
silly blues, yes.
Yeah, God, I think there's other words for them.
But the fire brigade would know that smell, wouldn't they?
Oh,
Firemen
yeah.
would
Not
know.
necessarily.
Yep.
Not
Oh,
necessarily.
they'd have experienced burned
Oh, it
corpses
must be
before.
here.
Not necessarily, but you could reasonably expect that some firemen would have, but I wouldn't say that it's fair to say that all firemen would know that smell.
All right.
Right, so the neighbours are worried and they turn up and there's like a bonfire like going nutso in their like backyard and it's verging on burning out of control. And there are old Sam and Sabrina turning the chicken very calm. Oh, just barbecuing over
Just
here.
burning off a bit of
They seem
leaves,
relaxed and unconcerned as the raging flames were just a few feet away. Once firefighters had got the blaze under control, they made a grisly discovery. When they asked Sam what he was burning, he shrugged and calmly said that he'd bought a carcass for a sheep down at the Wimbledon market.
Why would you burn it? Anyway.
Yeah. On the contrary, Thomas Hunt, who was one of the firefighters, one of the first ones, said that he believed what he saw was a human nose and fingers burning in the fire.
Oh.
They began sifting through the ashes. They found blackened pieces of clothing, jewelry, and they also found her glasses, and the frames had melted. So the sheep was either all dressed up.
There must have been, yes, all right, there were things that a sheep shouldn't be wearing, but just, was she fully burned? Because you've got to get to some incredible heat to burn them.
Temperature.
Yeah. No, okay. All right.
Well, if the glasses were there, you'd kind of think it wasn't
Yeah, true.
that hot.
But normally when you cremate someone, you don't.
They were
So
probably
she wasn't all
burning her
ashes,
in
no.
bits
Her
and
remains
pieces
were
or
there.
something.
She would have been charred,
Again.
I'd say. A
Yeah.
charred
Yeah.
remains. Yeah.
I think it's 750.
It's something
degrees.
exceptionally high.
Yeah,
yes.
really
yes.
hot.
So they're just burning her body in the backyard in downtown Wimbledon.
Again, not thinking about it.
What a pack of French Algerians.
Nicely played.
They're just gross. And I don't care for their mental health issues.
No, they are really vile. They are just, I feel this word underplays it so badly, but they're just so mean
Yeah.
to her. Like
Yeah,
they're just
yeah.
so
Vicious.
They're
vicious.
They're whipping her with cords. They're
Oh,
doing everything
wow.
they can to make her life an absolute misery to get this information that doesn't exist. And they're just taking all dignity away from it.
That's why I can't help but think
so
they get some
distressful.
level of joy out of it. What are we going to do today? Oh, there's nothing on TV. Let's go and flog
I'm
the
not quite
poor
sure
au
the
pair.
conversation started like that. I think there was probably some kind of a psychotic frenzy going on between the two of them.
Did you steal the remote?
Things could go a little bit tense.
It's just so nonsensical.
Before we were talking about smells, you reminded me of something.
Yeah.
On the weekend, it's
How very dare you?
you two
I've showered and I've put deodorant on.
You two are always razzing me about, how I know stuff, right? And my great
yes.
Anyway, on the weekend, Tone and I went up to the houseboat, and when we entered the boat, there was something not quite right about the toilet situation. And the boat had, because it had been closed up, had a bit of a sewagey smell.
Can you not back up a really disgusting, hard to listen to story
With
a
another
story
really
about
hard, disgusting, hard
sewagey
to listen
smell? Yeah, like, God, what are you doing?
Really strong smells. So anyway, we go in and
I'd like to
said, "Look,
apologise to our listeners on behalf of what Schmitty's about to say, just in case.
It was a tip, right? Anyway, so I go in and I'm like, okay, look, let's just deal with this now. I feel like maybe one of the gaskets or something is loose or something. Anyway, so we take the toilet off, pull it away, which means we are basically face to face with the poo chute. Carla, this is a tank with poo and wee.
A magic pipe.
In a black tank with a magic pipe. What was that? Oh,
What was that
yeah. Magic. Was it the magic
No,
pipe?
magic.
It was something like that. Paul, the cruise
What
story.
they call it, the cruise one?
Yeah, yeah.
magic pipe.
There
Magic
was.
pipe.
Yeah.
This is into a black tank, but yes. Anyway, the smell, to quote Kenny, was going to outlast religion. And I'm like, oh, it was really bad. And then I remembered from multiple TV shows of hardened forensic people how they deal with the smell of a corpse. And I went into the bathroom and I got
Got some barrier cream.
close pot of Vicks. Rubbed it into my nostrils.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't
Job
smell a
done.
thing. Sorted.
Nice.
Yeah. So anyway,
Yeah.
just
Wow.
reminded that if you ever have a particularly putrid smell that you have to work around but don't want to have to deal with, Vixen up the nose will sort it.
Right. So
Literally no
we're
reaction.
back at the barbecue.
She's been ordering her papers all
Yeah,
this
but-
time.
I've
I
been
feel
sorting out.
I feel like I gave her a good time to sort of
You
organise
did. You've got
herself.
me on. I'm ready to go to trial now.
Okay.
But we do need to arrest them first. They haven't been arrested yet.
Okay.
But unsurprisingly, after barbecue bonfire night, there were some pretty convincing suspicions of who might be responsible. So they recovered Sophie's body from the bonfire in the backyard. And then it was at that point they started to learn about the couple's employment of Sophie over the months. And naturally, suspicion fell on the pair. And a thorough search of the house gave them an expansive sort of
And 8 hours
recordings,
of,
8 hours of recordings of the torture sessions.
Oh. They just were not thinking. Yeah.
And there's a very sad photograph that's
That's
in all the
awful.
press. This girl, she's just kneeling, and her parents said that she's unrecognisable compared to what she was because she was so emaciated. She just had not been looked after, fed, or she probably couldn't eat. They'd fractured her ribs. They'd broken her breastbone. They'd belted her with electrical cables. All of this, she was covered in, I don't know, she was just burnt, but, they had just beaten her to a pulp before drowning her. She probably had no energy. I don't think she could have fought if she tried. Do you know what I mean? What a terrible, terrible demise. And imagine being parents having to listen to that. It's hideous. So the trial of Medouni and Sabrina Kouider, and at the time they were 40, and I did read 35, for the murder of Sophie Leonette began in March 2018 at London's Old Bailey. The two admitted that they tried to dispose of the au pair's body. However, when it came to who was responsible, surprise, surprise,
It was
for the
Sam.
murder, they pointed the finger at each other,
Yeah,
both
right.
refusing to take the blame. During the trial, Richard Hall, QC, spoke about how the naive and shy Sophie was unable to defend herself against a manipulative and abusive person like Sabrina. Sophie was not only young, but also, we suggest, naive and particularly vulnerable, and this made her an easy target for abuse and exploitation. They were easily able to break her down with their vicious and relentless interrogations, which involved beatings and holding her head under the water in the bathtub. Eventually, they forced Sophie to confirm Sabrina's deranged accusations were true, that she was conspiring to help Mark Walton come to their home so he could drug them and sexually assault them. They threatened her with rape, violence, and prison if she did not confess. And I did read an excerpt somewhere where it was how Sabrina would talk to her, which was that thing where she'd say, if you don't do this, I can't help you. You will go to prison. So you need to tell me what's happening. You need to tell me the truth. I'm on your side. If you help me, if you give me the information I need. Otherwise, what choice do I have? They'll take you to prison. So that's how it all started before it was like full on just building her all the time. Where she does that kind of, give me what I want, because it's not really me, right?
Yeah, I'm not
trying
the
to
bad
save
one
you from the worst outcome, which is you'll have to go to prison because you've been colluding with him. So you might as well tell me now, because then I can at least try and help you. So she was doing oh my God. And this is all filmed, right? So that's why they actually have the transcripts of what has been said at different points. I mean, could you even imagine it? A video taken on September the 18th, 2017 of Sophie confessing was shown to the jury. In it, she's emaciated and looks completely broken. Shortly after the video, she was dead. You'll have seen the state of Sophie when she uttered the words that can be heard on the video clip, and whatever may be said about the final confessions, it is anything but voluntary, Hall had said. He described the defendant's actions as a campaign of intimidation, torture and violence, which left the young woman crushed. These interrogations were recorded on their cell phones. More than 8 hours of recordings were recovered, and they played them to the jury. So meanwhile, these pair are still fixated on, you did it, no, you did it, no, you did it. In one of the recordings from September 11, 9 days before her murder, Sabrina was heard screaming at Sophie, you destroy everything. I was trying to find myself again. I pray to God not to make me touch you. I don't want to make my hands dirty. So what a
I hate
piece
her.
of work.
Oh.
Yeah, she's not likable.
Oh,
I hate her.
I'm really hate her.
I
She's
know.
not likable, as Carla says.
No. Before her body was thrown onto the bonfire, Sophie suffered significant violence at the hands of her employers. a fractured jawbone, sternum, and 5 broken ribs. In the end, the defendants burned the body by, creating a bonfire in their backyard whilst barbecuing the chicken next to it. The fire was put out, and then the burnt debris was turned over with a spade to ensure the fire had been fully extinguished. As the ash was turned, the remains of Sophie started to appear. They planned to tell a story about how Sophie had left their employment out of the blue and returned to France, and her ultimate cause of death was never actually determined. The 3 most likely causes were the blow to her head, strangulation, or drowning. They don't ultimately know what actually killed her. So Mark Walton flies in from LA to testify.
Okay,
finally.
right.
Yeah.
Well, after I finished having sex with a cat.
Yeah. He says, and I must say, a lot of this information is from the blog, which is the Talk Murder With Me, and it is brilliant because she's pulled it together in such a way that she talks about the quotes and whatever else, and it's really digestible. Full credit to the writer of this. It is brilliant. So Mark Walton flies in from Los Angeles. During his testimony, he said that he and Kouider had been in a relationship for 2 years, Sabrina, and he was very much in love with her. She was, however, extremely volatile and unpredictable. He could never predict when she would suddenly snap and start screaming at him. She would go from softly spoken French accent, then she would flip, get very angry, very loud, and just not care where we were. She would just go crazy over something trivial, he said. He'd paid for several nannies, but she would always fire them, paranoid they were stealing from her and flirting with him. So that's obviously when they were still together. We have heard that your name was referred to by Sabrina Kouider before and after her arrest. Have you ever heard of Sophie Leonette Hall? Asked Walton. Never, ever, Walton replied. Had you ever talked to her? Never. Had you ever communicated with her in any way? No way, never. The first time he had ever heard of the au pair was on September 21 when police in London contacted him the day after the murder, Walton told the court. So it wasn't even that she was talking to him.
There's literally no truth to it.
No, it's not going both ways. It was totally focused on poor Sophie. He wasn't even aware. Do you know what I mean? He wasn't hearing about that. The defence was weak, but was not the attorney's fault.
No surprises.
What the pair were done was indefensible.
Yeah, God.
It's pretty hard, yeah.
And it was also a bit of a mess. It was said Sam's initial statement was that Sophie died by accident while he interrogated her in the bath. However, he retracted this, saying he only said this to protect Sabrina. In his new statement, he said he was actually woken up by Sabrina telling him that Sophie was not breathing. He got up and found her in the bath. Sabrina told him she was not breathing. So it starts to just become an absolute mess of he said, she said, I was there, I wasn't there, she was breathing, she was already dead. It was just an absolute mess. What I find this really, if you didn't like it before, this really pissed me off. She read I don't know if she read it out. She wrote an apology letter to Sophie and her family, which was read out, probably not by her, during the sentencing hearing.
No,
and it reads,
she shouldn't have even been allowed to. Sorry, go.
Dear Sophie, may peace be with you. First of all, I wish everyone, including Sophie, especially her parents and family who are suffering badly, to know how deeply sorry I am for what happened to Sophie.
Oh, fuck off.
We shared
many
good times together.
Oh, go away. I'll be gone with you.
You.
You outrageous fellow.
Oh, Sabrina, you do disappoint me. Let me just start that again. First of all, I wish everyone, including Sophie, especially her parents and family who are suffering badly, to know how deeply sorry I am for what happened to Sophie.
For what
we
happened?
We shared many good times together. Yes. Listen to the way everything's couched.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
It's not our
if you didn't like
fault.
this will
it.
infuriate you.
I'm
surprised it was allowed to be read out.
This is flipping upsetting.
We shared many good times together, as well as pains, until things went terribly wrong, and it ended up in this horrendous tragedy. Full stop.
No one could have seen it coming. It wasn't our fault. We didn't do it.
This horrendous tragedy. It's not fucking tragic.
It's not a flipping tragedy, is it, Clarky?
This horrendous, interrogation, torture and murder. I think of you every day, and I am shocked and sad that you are not part of this world anymore. It feels like a horrible dream to me that I wish I could just wake up from. Every day I live with sadness and sorrow. I am suffering every day thinking of you and what happened to you that dreadful night. I only wish I could turn the clock back so that it never happened and you would still be alive with us today. I will now live without hope, and I cannot ever imagine ever being happy again. I struggle every day, and I am very disappointed in myself.
Very disappointing,
Sophie,
Sabrina.
I wish things could have been different, and I hope that you rest in peace with God. With deepest regret, Sabrina Kouider. Could you imagine being her parents and listening to that?
I have days where I feel disappointed in myself, but certainly not because I've murdered someone and then said, I'm very disappointed in myself. You know, I feel very disappointed. I'm like, excuse me, when you have killed someone, when you have tortured someone for 12 days, you should feel more than disappointment. You should feel disgust. You should feel like you are a repugnant human being who has no right to any joy.
If she was genuinely sorry, she should be pleading guilty.
If she was genuinely sorry, she wouldn't have written that.
I'm not comfortable with that letter being read out.
No, I agree.
I think it's a disgrace.
Because that's not evidence.
The defence were not defending, were they?
No, what did they have to work with? But it's one of those things where I think, oh, wow, talk about kick someone when they're down. I think it's bad. It doesn't say I'm responsible. It says, well, that got a little bit out of hand.
Tragedy of that terrible thing that happened on that day, of which I'm not really responsible for.
And if only you were here with us. I mean, there's just things that come out to me.
The us upset me. It's like you should be nowhere near them.
I don't think I will ever be happy ever again.
Yeah,
so who cares? No one cares how you feel.
Hideous.
You negated the right to be happy when you put a vacuum cleaner pipe up your bottom.
What? That's going back to that nursing friend of yours, isn't it?
Three times. The tall guy. Watch the film. Funny. Anyway, moving on.
Right.
So in terms of sentencing, in an attempt to get leniency for his client, Sabrina's lawyer told the judge that her actions were a result of delusions and personality disorders, which left her with irrational and completely overwhelming fear that Sophie was conspiring against her.
Oh, that's all right then.
Yeah.
Sorry, our mistake. We were judging you.
Yes. He said her behaviour towards the victim was entirely driven by Sabrina's mental illness in her desperation to obtain evidence of Mr. Walton's abuse. While Judge Nicholas Hilliard...
Sorry, Mr. Walton's non-existent abuse?
That's right. It didn't exist.
Yeah.
While Judge Nicholas Hilliard acknowledged that the couple was severely delusional, suffering from a folie à deux, as I was talking about before, particularly Sabrina, who was the driving force. This was not defence for their heinous. How did you get that wrong? This was no defence for their heinous treatment and eventual murder of their shy and vulnerable au pair. Looking directly at Sam and Sabrina, Hilliard said, "You were both involved in torturing Sophie in the bath in the lead up to her death, in making her think she would drown unless you gave her information you wanted, which was not in her power to give you, because it did not exist. The suffering and the torture you put her through before her death was prolonged and without pity." Addressing Sabrina, he said that her motivations were to see Sophie and Mark Walton suffer for no justifiable reason. He finished by saying, "I do not think you thought for one moment you were acting lawfully. I'm sure you knew the way you interrogated her was unacceptable in the extreme, that it was unlawful to assault her, and that she was in a dreadful state by the time of her death, and torturing her in the bath was totally and utterly wrong."
Good for him.
So they were both sentenced to life in prison for murder and to serve a minimum of 30 years. And Catherine, who is Sophie's mother, was quoted as saying, no God will ever forgive you both for what you have done to my daughter. You are equally as evil as one another." They said that she was so nurturing. She loved animals and children. She couldn't see suffering in others. They described her as kind and gentle. She was a pearl. She loved everyone. She loved making people happy. And what a horrendous thing. I actually watched a video where after the sentencing, there was a statement that was made, and it sort of really made me think, and it was talking about her parents. Imagine having your child at a distance, knowing things are starting to descend into something, but I mean, you could never have imagined this, right? And then having to sit through a court and hear the level of evil that has been perpetrated against her, and then listening to that goddamn apology letter, and the pair of them then blame each other, and then, you're hearing about her, it's just because she's got a mental illness, and then, then Mark Walton turning up and going, never heard, no, this is totally foreign to me. Never heard anything about it. As this woman said, who was talking on their, or not on their behalf, but after the trial, she said they're the ones who get a life sentence. The mum and dad are the ones who get
Absolutely.
Of
the
course.
they're the ones who get the
Of
life. They're the ones who suffer every single day. Don't worry about, good old Sabrina going, I don't know that I'll ever be happy ever again. These people having to live with that demise of your child. Oh my God, horrendous.
It just speaks to what an incredible narcissist she is, that she talks about, I'll never be happy again. It's like, it's not about you. You murdered this person. Oh, it's infuriating.
It is infuriating, isn't it? So that is the story of poor Sophie Leonet. Because, I just think...
She had so much ahead of her.
Yeah.
Shall I sentence?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'm going to return to a sentence that I did badly once upon a time. Once before, I tried to sentence someone to the pain, and I'm going to do it again.
Okay, well done.
Thanks for sharing.
Well done, you.
The to the pain is a quote
Any
from...
details?
To the pain is a quote from The Princess Bride. And this is for Sabrina because she's so beautiful, right? We've got to remember she's a very beautiful person on the outside. To the pain means the first thing you will lose will be your feet below the ankles, then your hands at the wrist, next to your nose. So we're cutting these things off, right? The next thing you will lose will be your left eye, followed by your right. Your ears you'll keep, and I'll tell you why. So that every shriek of every child seeing your hideousness will be yours to cherish. Every babe that weeps at your approach, every woman who cries out, "Dear God, what is that thing?" will echo in your perfect ears. That is what to the pain means. It means I leave you in anguish, wallowing in freakish misery forever.
Is that from The Princess Brides?
Yeah.
I thought that was some kind of happy little,
Cartoon thing.
Yeah, like
It's not a cartoon. Oh my God, what is wrong with the two of you? Right, that's it, Carla. Between
I'm watching either.
Hen's Night, between Hen's Night and Wedding, Princess Bride. We've got to watch it.
There's not enough time. If there was 5 months in between those two events, there would not be enough time to watch that trash.
Perhaps I will bring the...
How very dare you.
How very dare you.
Cults classic, I think we call it,
Find you
not trash.
impertinent.
Isn't it?
Average.
I know watched it. I'm just looking it up now.
Have you watched
Okay,
it,
so-
Swanny?
She hasn't, but, just because you...
Oh, but I do. I'm aware of it, but no, I've never watched it.
Anyway,
I wouldn't
that
have
is
expected
for
that.
Sabrina. And I've got my...
What, that I hadn't watched it?
Can I sentence Sam?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
stop interrupting, Swanny.
I'm going to send Sam on a riverside walk and date with Wiggers.
Oh, no.
Did you have to do
with
that?
the promise of sex?
We'll just leave it to your imagination.
Schmitty.
I'm just starting to get over
because
that.
it's just brought your bottle back
With Wiggers.
Yeah, but it'll be in Queensland because she can't get out of Queensland.
That's right, yeah.
It's fine.
That's what I'm hoping. I want her in Queensland.
They're my sentences. I think that's a fair sentence.
Yeah, I'm happy
Really
with
good.
I'm happy with both of those. Well done. Although
Yes.
the Princess Bride one I still don't get, but
It's all about the fact that she's beautiful, and I'm going to mar her beauty and make everyone be disgusted by the sight of her they can see how ugly she is.
I get that. I just don't get
On the
why that
outside,
was in
which
the
is
Princess
mirrors-
Bride, which sounds like
You'll get there if you ever
someone's
watch
marrying
it.
a prince. Well, I won't. So let's just move on. Hey, I really want to call out the fact that I don't believe any of what she said. I think that whole link back to Sylvia Likens when she was treated appallingly. I think this is just an act of absolute evil. I think that they got some level of joy out of it. I just don't believe that people would do that stuff and then feel sorry for it. I can't get my head around that, and I can't connect her pathetic apology with the fact that maybe there's a mental health issue that has caused all of this.
I feel sorry for myself. Yeah.
No, but it's not so much
I'm
that
disappointed.
as
What
more.
crust?
I just think she enjoyed it, and I get that maybe she was a little bit delusional. Whatever, delusional people don't do what she did. She did that because she wanted to. She had all the power. She had every opportunity not to do any of it, and she did the whole freaking lot of it. As did he, and I don't think he had freaking folie à deux. I think that's just a term to make us somehow think that one of them wasn't as responsible as the other.
He was struck. I will edit that out.
As I live and breathe.
I think he...
Is that like top shelf magic?
Yeah.
Yeah,
What?
it is,
You
it
know
is,
we've got a
yeah.
magic pussy
Or is it
thing,
bottom
but-
shelf?
Yeah. Sure.
If you've seen images of these people, he was not an attractive man and he was batting way above his weight.
Why? Because she needed him at the time?
Yeah, she used him entirely, right? But he also was happy to be in this situation because he had this beautiful woman that he, like, seriously. you
I
know.
don't think he would ever have done that for not meeting her. I think she would
I
have
agree.
done that regardless.
100% agree.
Magic pussy.
No, magic pussy is where you're an ugly woman and you're still able to pull
Yeah.
and have
Oh,
sex
is
with
it?
lots of men.
Isn't it
Yeah.
where you can...
I think-
What if it's where you've got a pussy that makes men do things that they wouldn't normally do?
We need a new term for that. That's more like
We do
black
need-
magic
there's a-
pussy.
There's a line of distinction that needs to be made. I do think. What's that saying? Where it's like you're a prawn where you've got a bad head and a good body, or something like that.
Butterface.
Ooh.
Oh yeah. What about a face?
Butterface.
Is it
What?
a face is terrible?
Oh, she's good looking, but her face.
But a face. Yeah.
Butterface. That's funny.
So I know, we should not be continuing these horrible misogynistic anti-female tropes that we're pulling out all the time.
What?
But her face. Anyway.
So anyway, I'm going to sentence them to so there's a street level apartment,
Crossing.
townhouse kind of thing, and if you open the door and walk in through the kitchen, you end up going downstairs, and you go down maybe a flight or two of stairs, and you end up in this carved out rock kind of dirt room.
Basement.
Well, no, because it's not part of the house. It's actually an extension of, which is just a dugout kind of thing. So it's all dirt walls and whatever. And there are two pits in there. And so at this point, I want you to think about Silence of the Lambs and the
Yep.
senator's daughter who was in one of the pits?
Mm-hmm.
So they are both going to be in pits, separate pits where they can still hear each other scream and they can razz each other. And in the pits, if they look up, there's going to be Silence of the Lambs playing on repeat so that they can see where this is all going. And every now and then, Jane Gum is going to come and get them
It rubs lotion on
get them
its
to put
skin.
the lotion on its skin.
It does whatever it's
and-
told.
Yeah, or else it gets the hose again. All of that.
That's right. It rubs the lotion on its skin.
It puts the lotion on its skin, or else it gets the hose again.
That was a very drag queen sounding.
He is
Jane
right.
Gum.
He's trying to trans. That's why
Okay, all right.
That's why he's making a skin suit. So they both.
fuck me.
Yeah, that's exactly
Oh.
right. Yes. Yes. Oh God. So right. So it's going to just be an absolute torturous existence for them. There's going to be no Clarice Starling coming to save them, and they're just going to have every single day. And they might get the hose every now and then. I'm okay with that too, regardless of whether they put the lotion on, because we're all a bit delusional. We don't necessarily believe that just because they rubbed lotion on their skin,
But they actually did
rubbed lotion on their skin. We need proof of it, and if you can't give us proof, you get the hose.
Right, Swanny. Psychological nut punch, anyone?
Maybe.
Nut punch
Maybe.
city limits.
I've been trying to come up with something, and I know I often say just go. I start off with the idea that I've got, the sort of the germ of the idea, and maybe you guys can give me a bit more colour. But what I found, one of the things that stopped me in my tracks with this story was that apology letter. I can't be doing that. I just cannot believe that it was allowed to be read out. To what effect?
It almost sounds
It's
like a
awful.
victim statement, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Like it's...
But I was thinking I would like a letter to be written to Sabrina, and the letter needs to be shared with, well, what is effectively the entire world, everybody that knows her or she might want to have know her. So I was going to say it would be published in the newspaper, but even then I think, I want it to have, I want it to be so mortifyingly public that everybody that she's ever had anything to do with or could have anything to do with will be fully aware of the real person that she is. And so I want it to, her letter started off, "Dear Sophie, may peace be with you." And I don't know if this letter can come from, I don't think it actually even needs to be from Sophie, but, something along the lines of, "Dear Sabrina," instead of it being, "May peace be with you," it's like, "I hope you're in hell." And then, she wants to say,
and if you're not, it's coming.
And then what I want it to do is expose her for the person that she has always been, and the fact that she is not a person of good character. She's never done anything particularly of note. You've pretended to be all these things. And I don't think you even need to say that, because I don't want it to be you're, the ex-girlfriend of ex-Boyzone person. I don't want it to be, was said to work as a stylist, makeup artist, fashion designer, songwriter. You're none of those things, actually. Yeah. You're just a piece of shit who's a pretender, who the whole time takes the next chance to get what you need at any given point.
You wouldn't waste toilet paper on her, would you?
I don't know what I want it to say particularly, but that is
and who's going to see
idea,
it?
which is like everybody that she would ever think could or possibly care about her. So future, past and present, everybody. So that everybody knows that she's just a master manipulator who used people for what she needed at any given point, but you weren't really that successful in it. You were still on benefits. You were still, you weren't living this high life that you thought you were. And you were just a bad person who did bad things. And at the end, you did the very worst things that you could do to anybody. And no one thinks anything of you. You're just
trash.
You're just nothing. Yeah.
And I feel like anyone who meets Sabrina should have an induction. And I think to what you're saying, perhaps what it should be is them watching maybe some of the footage of what they did.
What she's capable of.
But I don't want them to see Sophie in it, because it shouldn't be about Sophie.
No, agree.
But also, whilst the footage is playing, I want them to hear her reading out. So in the top corner, there can be her reading out her apology letter.
Oh,
and that's what
double screen.
everyone. So they see what she's doing and they hear what she says about it afterwards.
Yeah.
And then they can choose to go on and meet her or go, you know what, thanks, but I'm out of here because she's messed up.
I have an idea. We started this story in France. And one of the things that I find interesting about France is the amount of dog excrement on the pavements of Parisian streets. So I'm going to turn Sabrina into a cognizant, back to your point, Carla, that she's just a piece of shit. So let's turn her into a cognizant piece of shit and put her on a Parisian street and let her get stepped on regularly for people to curse and say merde, whenever they stand on there. Oh,
merde de chien.
Merde de chien.
Shit of the dog.
Whenever the shit of the dog comes along and you step on that. But she is aware that she just got squelched and that someone just called her dog shit, and it's going to repeat and repeat and repeat. And she can't get much, in my opinion, she can't get much lower than that.
Lower than that? No, I agree. I'm happy with that.
Yeah. Right.
So, merde de chien.
There we go.
I feel like I'm doing Italian and French together. I'm not sure if my language is correct.
I've never heard that statement, but I think shit of the dog is very appropriate.
Allow me just to double check it. Dog shit in...
It could almost be murdering
in
shit.
French.
Merde de chien, we are right.
Oh, it is.
Oh, merde de chien, there you go. So there you go. Well, I think we have covered the very, very sad case of Sophie.
Yeah.
Poor kid. And let the merde de chien, that is Sabrina and Sam, rot in jail, frankly, where they belong.
Yep.
So on that happy note, as we say every week, miss you already.
Ta-ta.
Au revoir.
Ciao,
Au revoir. Ciao, ciao, ciao.
Au revoir. Au revoir.
Thanks for listening to Trial by Wine. You can contact us at trialbywine@gmail.com. Please rate, review and subscribe to Trial by Wine on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com, Trial by Wine, or visit our website www.trialbywine.com to donate to us. Your support will help us cover many more cases and apply wacky sentences. We really appreciate you listening and hope you tell everyone about us. Our cover art is by John Christo and music is by Beauchamp from pixabay.com.